Welcome to Beyond Better, a podcast that explores a simple but profound idea. We all deserve to live lives we love, and that includes our work lives too. I'm your host, Stacey Ennis, an author, book coach, speaker, and long-time location-independent entrepreneur living in Portugal with my family of 4. Join me as I talk business, location independence, writing, publishing, and so much more, all focused on building a life that is beyond better. Welcome! I have been thinking a lot lately in my parenting about resilience with my kids and how to help them develop resilience. I don't think that is something that everybody develops naturally. So I was really excited when I met this week's guest and saw that she talks all about this. And I'm excited this week also to get to talk about her many stages of her career and reinvention and stepping into new places. So often we think that when we choose a path in life, that is our set path and we kind of just need to put our head down and keep moving forward. But actually there are so many different opportunities that we have to create new pathways for ourselves, to reinvent ourselves, to take on new and big challenges. And this week's guest demonstrates all of that. So let me introduce you to Nina. Nina Sossaman-Pogue is a sought-after speaker, best-selling author, and podcast host with a remarkable journey through elite athletics, television news, and corporate leadership. After leaving home at age 13 to train as a gymnast, she became a USA Gymnastics team member and later an SEC athlete at LSU until an injury ended her gymnastics career. This injury was a catalyst for a 20-year run as an Emmy-winning journalist and news anchor. Nina later transitioned into tech and corporate leadership, playing an integral role in a successful IPO. Today, she helps individuals and organizations thrive through challenges and change to reach new levels of success. Nina, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacey. What a lovely introduction.
You have a really incredible backstory and so many varied points throughout your life, both as a kid and professionally. I'd love to hear more about that, share with our listeners about your backstory and what led you into the work that you do today.
Yeah, and I like to say that my backstory is what got me here. I had no plans to do this, but as we all know, life doesn't always go as planned.
Mm.
So that's how I ended up right here talking to you today. And I think it all started, when I was a young child. I was a Navy brat, youngest of 4 kids. So I'll take you back to the beginning. Navy brat, youngest of 4 kids, and was really hyper. So my parents put me in gymnastics. Got to do something with Nina. And that was always the commonality, no matter where we lived. And I was very good at it. As you said, I moved away from home when I was 13, moved into the to an Olympic training center. And then I made the US team, traveled all over the world on the cover of magazines and as an Olympic hopeful. This was like Mary Lou Retton, Bart Connor years. That's who was on the team with me. And then I didn't make the team. And I bombed a qualifying meet and I wasn't in the top, few. I was more in the top 20, not in the top few. And that's how that works in that sport. Especially back then, it wasn't so much of a selection system. You either made it, by your scores or you didn't. And I bombed. And so that was my first big, what I call this is not my plan. This is not what was supposed to happen. And I had to figure out who I was and what was next there because I felt, shame. I was embarrassed to walk the halls of my high school. I felt like I let down my family and let down my friends and my coaches, obviously. So really difficult time. But as you said, I went on to college and I became, a top recruit and went to LSU, which is a great gymnastics program. Was back then in the 80s, it was a powerhouse and they just won the national championships last year. So still a powerhouse in women's gymnastics. But then my freshman year, I blew out my knee. And then I lost the sport. That is very much how I identified. I was a gymnast in my head. I'd spent most of my life in the gym. So then I had to figure out who I was without that. Fortunately, I found, journalism and fell in love with that. And then I did many years in television. But during that journey, at one point, they went young. I was let go in budget cuts. They went younger and blonder. And so I had to kind of figure out like this was not part of the plan either. So I had these moments in my life where I was very much all bought in and going on a journey where I felt like I was having big success. And then life lifed at me. And this happened. And then I had a traumatic experience in my late 30s that really set me down the spiral. And I was in a really dark place for a while and didn't even think I wanted to go on. I just thought the world would be a better place without me for a while there. And so I had to dig myself out of that really dark hole, and did. And then went back on television. Then I got into tech. I mean, I won. So in television, I won an Emmy for the best newscaster in the Southeast, and like big success. But then had dark times on the other side of it. And then I get into tech and had big success there. I share all this because I don't really talk from the stage much about my successes. I talk a lot about those failures and how you go through a failure and not just survive it and trudge along and get through life, but learn, grow stronger, adapt, and like get so much better on the other side of it. And that is the definition of resilience that I work with. So that led me on this journey, but it wasn't until I was 50 and my kids left for college and I realized I'd become this person that people came to all the time for help. And I said, well, I knew I was helping one by one, but I wanted to help in a more meaningful way. And so I stepped away, did the research, wrote my books, started speaking, and have been doing this for years now. So there's my backstory.
All squeezed in. I know there's so many things that we could dig into in every
Yeah.
single point that you gave. I really appreciate you sharing both the highlights and the low moments. One of the things that I've learned as I get older, get to know people in different ways, and especially when I make new friends or get to know somebody that I really respect and admire, and I'm looking at all that they're accomplishing and the great person they are, almost every time that person has a dark story. They have a something that they overcame, that they had to navigate through, that they had to go from. And I'm often reminded that we forget that about people. Like how often do we really look at the person across from us and think that person has been through hard things that shaped who they are today? It's not something that we typically like hold in our interactions and relationships with others.
Yeah, and maybe it was the journalist in me that always, when I interview people, everybody has a story.
Yeah.
But also in my own life, I knew my story, and I truly believe, and that's why I call it in my talks and the work that I do, I call it your reverse resume. So I have people draw a line across a piece of paper. So you take the piece of paper and turn it sideways. You draw a line across the top piece of paper, through the middle of the piece of paper, and you put 10 dots. So say you're going to live, to 100, that's 10, 20, 30, 40. And yes, I need to drink less wine and take better care of myself, but I'm going to pretend I'm living to be 100. And you put those dots there. And then your resume is all the stuff on the years across the top. And then down below, I have people put all the stuff they've been through. And everybody, especially now that I speak, people come up to me with their stories all the time. I look at people in that way in which you said across the table. I always am curious about what people's stories are, and not their accolades, but actually what they've overcome. And I have people put the things you've overcome down below. And that can be, I was bullied in school, or I raised a child with a disability, or I lost a parent, or I got fired or failed or divorced or whatever, all those things across the bottom. And I say that reverse resume, that stuff down below the line, that's what makes you who you are. That's the stuff that really builds character and lets you see, what your abilities are, what's really in you, what are you capable of. That's where you see that is when in that reverse resume part. But
Such
everybody's
a
got a story. Nobody gets a pass, folks. Everybody's got stuff.
Everyone. That's such a powerful activity. I love the way that you frame that. The other area of curiosity that I often have is why one person can go through something, another person can go through something similar, and they take deviating paths, right? Like this one might navigate it and self-actualize through it, or maybe it's a trauma response sometimes, the hyperdrive. This person may end up completely on the other side and really never move through it. You do a lot of work in the space of resilience. Do you have a kind of understanding or explanation of that? Is that something that you've been curious about in your own work?
Absolutely. That is my work. So that's exactly what happened to me. I became very curious about that because, as I said, I became this person that people would come to for advice or for help. And at the time, I was working in corporate. I worked at a SaaS company, software as a service, big tech company here in the States. And I turned 50 and I did one of those exercises where I read it in some book, maybe I heard it on a podcast, and I put it all out. I took my last 2 months of my calendar and I looked at it and I said, where am I helping? Where am I hurting? Like, where am I helping the universe? What do I love to do? What do I hate to do? And I circled it with all these colors. It was an exercise someone gave me. And I realized that the times when I was helping people were the times that I felt like I was adding the most value. And then I looked at those and thought, what are those times? What am I saying? And in those moments, it was, a young guy who booked time on my calendar who wasn't even in one of my departments. I probably had 200 people reporting to me at the time. And I ended up in a room, a little conference room with him. And he said, I hear you're really good at getting people through things. And um, I'm having panic attacks coming across the bridge. And I was like, oh, well, have you thought of this? Do this. And I would help them. One time it was a woman who'd lost her husband. Another time a neighbor knocked on my door and I opened it and he's standing there with 2 beers in his hands with tears running down his face. And he said, I just lost my job. Nina, I don't know how to tell my wife. I don't know how to go home. Can you help me through this? And I would walk him through the house and it sat on the end of the dock and we worked it all through and he was okay. So I knew I was helping, but to your question, I really didn't know why it was that some people got through this and they didn't, and what it was I was saying that was helping these people not just survive this thing they were going through, but that figure it out and get stronger on the other side. So I stepped away and did the homework and did the research. And what my framework that I've come up with is those commonalities. I looked at companies and companies who had almost gone under and then figured out, like Lego so many times struggled and then it's Lego. Like, how did that happen? It was one of the ones I did some research on. And then individuals, entrepreneurs, athletes who came so close to or had a huge fail or came so close to just calling it quits, but then had big success on the other side. I did that research and I found the commonalities in these 4 things that they all did. And that became, and it's a mix, it's my own mashup of stories and experiences and stoicism and neuroscience, a little cognitive behavior therapy, behavioral science. It's my own mashup of that. But there are certain things that people who get through and not just get to the other side, but, thrive on the other side do. And there are things that people who get stuck do. And it's the same for the highs and the lows, which is fascinating. It's your peaked in high school guy. It's the same thing. Like you just get stuck at points in your life unless you go through this mental process and look at your life in these 4 ways. So it's really, I think it's, and I don't have all the answers, obviously, and it's my own mashup, but I think it's fascinating, that question is, why do some people get stuck and why do some people manage to get through it?
It is one of those questions that I'm sure that there are some explanations to, but then there's other components of it that we'll never truly know based on the individual and their unique experiences. If somebody is listening to this right now that's in one of those periods of their life, which I'm sure you've had many people sit through your keynotes and workshops that you've done that are in those moments, what is it about your messaging, or is there something that you offer in those talks or in your books that has really resonated with people and helped them in those moments to find their way on the positive trajectory?
Yeah, so I'm happy to share my framework, and it's so simple, but so much to it. So everybody hears it in their own way, and you'll hear it when I say it here in a moment with whatever piece that you need to hear. And in that research, think about like the Oprah Winfrey's of the world, who born into poverty, gets fired, all this stuff in her life, and then um, and Lady Gaga. I mean, and lots of people who've been through these things. Like, just how did these people become so strong? So there are 4 things, and I call it this framework because whatever you're going through is your own this. Like this, and it's said, you can hear like, this is too much. I can't handle this. How did this become my life? So it's your this, whatever your this is. So I use THIS, and the T is this timeline thinking. Like I said before, like turning a piece of paper on its side and going, okay, this is my big, messy, marvelous life, the whole piece of paper. And you put that timeline there from 0 to 100. You can put whatever you're dealing with on a dot on that piece of paper. And that's where you are in your timeline. Couple of things that's really cool about that is wherever you are on your timeline, that dot that you're on, like I'm in my 50s, I'm over here. Stacy, you're back over here a little bit, parent and kid, like doing that part a little before me. But wherever that dot is, all the rest of that blank space ahead is pretty magical. But you can do a little math with that. And so when I blew out my knee when I was 19, um, the T part, this timeline, when I was 19, I blew out my knee and lost gymnastics. But at that point in my life, gymnastics was 75% of everything I knew in life. Because I'd started when I was like almost 5 years old, not even. So gymnastics was 75% of my whole life. So of course it felt like my life was over when I lost that sport and lost that identity. Now I can fast forward. This is the timeline perspective piece. I can fast forward to when I'm 50 and my kids leave for college, and I can go, look at all those years in television and in tech and parenting kids. And then gymnastics was only 78% of my life. I mean, it's a much smaller number. If I live to be 100, then it's only 15% of my life. Like, it just changes the math. So you can look at your life in that way and figure out where it fits in. And it's really healthy to do that kind of math for yourself in your life. Yes, it can feel like everything when something's happening, but it's not your whole life. The timeline piece is, this is a bad chapter. It's not the whole lifetime. And then the H piece is humans, like the people in your life. And I always have people, like, if you're going through a tough time right now, take a piece of paper and put a line down the middle and put on the other way and put who's helping and who's hurting. The people who are helping go on one side, the people who are hurting go on the other. And sometimes the people who we love the most or they love us the most still end up in the hurting side. Like, we have to be careful about that. And then you can also see if there's nobody in the helping piece, you need somebody over there. And people who have big success, the commonalities that we found, don't go it alone. Elite athletes have coaches. Entrepreneurs have mentors. People listen to podcasts to learn from other people. Like, we're not meant to go it alone. If you're trying to go it alone, that is never the answer to big success. You may get through it alone. You may succeed. Like, you may get to the other side and survive, but you're not going to thrive unless you let other people in. People who are really good and have big success are people who know how to ask for help. Knowing how to ask for help is really big. So that's the humans piece. And then the I is the isolate, and the THI and the this. THI, and the I is isolate. And that is on that piece of paper with the timeline, you put lines on both sides of your dot you put on there. And you have to go, okay, not before or after, but what am I actually dealing with that I can take action on? And I'm sure you've had other people say this on the show, Stacey. Any good therapist will tell you, if you spend all your time in the before the dot, that's the woulda, coulda, shoulda, why did I marry this guy? Why did I take this career? Why did I do this thing? And why did I, get made friends with these people? If you spend a lot of time in the past, that's where depression lives. And in that before the line stuff. And then on the other side is where anxiety lives, in the what ifs and the doomsday scenarios and all the craziness we fill in the gaps of our story that have yet to unfold. That's where anxiety lives. So this piece of depressions in the past, anxieties in the future, we have just the right now to take action on and to kind of be at peace for a moment. A big part of my framework as well. And that's back to ancient Chinese proverbs and Marcus Aurelius and a lot of stoicism, that be in the moment piece, to be present. And then the last piece is the S, and that's your story. And that's the language in our head that comes out of our mouth that becomes our story. So if you are in a tough spot right now and you're listening, there's probably you, like me, like Stacey, like all of us, we're all guilty of this self-sabotaging language we can do at times. Like, we overgeneralize, this is never going to work, or it always happens to me, or we catastrophize, this is ruined, never going to be okay on the other side. Or we jump to conclusions. Like, if somebody doesn't text us back, we start filling in those gaps. Like, they must not like me, or they must think this is a bad idea. If we send an email and then, like, someone doesn't respond quickly, we spend so much time thinking about it until they finally do. And that's just wasted energy and anxiety that we don't need. And we exaggerate. I have 8 million things to do. I have 50 loads of laundry. Like, who's really done 50 loads of laundry, right? Like, that's 6 is a bad weekend, but 50, that's a little ridiculous. We exaggerate, all of that type of self-sabotaging language that we have to work with. And that's the S piece in the framework. So it's put it in a timeline, pull in the right humans, isolate it, not before or after. What are we dealing with? And then what's the story? What are the words in your head that come out of your mouth that become your story? Because if you're saying every day that this is the worst or this is horrible or life is ruined, like that's the world you're living in. You got to change that language.
Such a powerful framework. And I was thinking it's powerful for the big things, but it's even powerful for smaller things. Like you mentioned laundry, where my brain went to is I'm reorganizing my 12-year-old's room with her right now, which is
Mm-hmm.
super fun to go through every single item she owns and make decisions on whether it stays or goes in her
Yeah.
life. And at the moment, we have all of her things in our basement in categories. So it's like total chaos at the moment in my house. And even today, I was going through, oh my gosh, I've got her her birthday party is next week, and we've got to get her room done. And it was like this. I was recognizing as you were talking through, it was like I was creating these stories around, oh, I've got so much. Oh, it's so overwhelming this weekend. It's all we're not going to get to go to the beach this weekend. We're going to be inside working on the room. And I'm like, what? I started this because I wanted to have fun and create a beautiful space for her and celebrate her and give her this place that she feels
Mm-hmm.
great. But I think the mundaneness of it, the chaos that it feels like sometimes has started to permeate my experience. So for me, even in this, listening to you in this small thing has been really helpful to help me reframe. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, that's what this framework is. So when I do this on a big stage, it's really fun because I'll say, there are the big thises, capital T, capital H, capital I, capital S. And it's on the screen behind me, like all caps this. And I'm like, those things take your life in a whole new direction. Those are like getting fired or getting divorced or a death in the family. Like you're going along and then life throws something at you that it's not going to be the same on the other side. Those are the big thises. And then I say there's the capital THISs, just the capital T's. And those are the things like you get in a car accident and maybe you're injured and your car's wrecked and you got to figure out a new way to get around. And maybe it's your busy time of year and you're in a boot and it's just like life. It's just harder for a while, but on the other side of it, you can get back on track, and I use the example, like my mom had a fall, she's 90, and I had to step away from everything that I had planned to do for those 2 months and take care of her, but I could get back on track. Those are the capital THISs. And then there's the little thises. And those are just the lowercase THIS, which if you take a moment and rearrange the letters, that's all that stuff.
Okay. I see what
I
you're
gave
saying.
you a second. There. So that's all that stuff that we have to deal with, and that's yours is somewhere in between there. I don't know where you might be a capital capital THIS, but that little stuff is like you get cut off in traffic, or you're getting ready to start a project and you get a phone call from your kid's school, or you just stuff you got to deal with. And our ability to put things in perspective, ask for help when we need to, use the right language, all of that for the big ones and the little ones makes such a difference on how we are resilient. And each time we get it right, we are building resilience. We are getting better at being resilient by using this framework, because resilience is a muscle you build. And each time you get through something, you go, oh, that didn't crush me. That didn't stop me. I'm still here. Every time you do that, you get a little stronger. So yeah, the cleaning up the room is a good example. Like it's this big project. This project I got to get done, and you have a deadline on it because you have a party. But really, let's reframe it and go, okay. And in the story of my life, it's going to be something she remembers and I remember. Let's put some good language around it. Let's get help if we need to. Pull in some other people. Let's not talk about before and after. What do we do? Let's just sit down and be in the moment, in those moments, and go, does this stay or does this go? And
Yeah.
yeah.
I appreciate about this though. It's not about, being Pollyanna around it. It's around really kind of looking at something in a real way and being like taking away the drama language that in this case, obviously when you're dealing with a really serious life situation, it's going to be a little different in how that is approached and how you kind of process it. But that is great for me. Thank you. You just saved my weekend with my daughter. I want to talk
Yay.
about mental wellness because I know that is a really big area of passion for you. It's something that you talk about a lot. And one of the things that you talk about in relation to mental wellness is this constant connectedness and this FOMO culture that we live in. and how that really is hurting our mental health. And I'd love to hear from you, your perspective on that, but also what advice you can give to our listeners that want to flip that over to JOMO, the joy of missing out, to or whatever that looks like for them, that they can combat this and really support mental wellness.
Yeah, I'll backtrack for one moment to that last to something you said that really piqued my thoughts. When you and it ties into this as well on the mental health piece. When you said if people are going through a really big thing and yours isn't as big, your this is your this. Don't discount it. And but if you're going through a really big all caps this, it's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. Like you can be okay. Oh no, you can not be okay for a while. It takes time. There's no timeline on this structure, but it's okay to not be okay. But it's not okay to stay that way, and it is totally up to you to get yourself to the other side. But and that's part of the mental health piece. But to the other mental health piece, the FOMO JOMO piece, um, the FOMO piece. So my take on that is tied into our ability to be excited about what we have accomplished and what we may accomplish and where we are in the pecking order. So this fear of missing out is really about fear of missing out on somebody, the stuff other people are doing and accomplishing. So say in the example I use, there's a great book. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. I'll start with that and this mental health and physical health stuff. And it's all about how in the animal kingdom, if a lion is chasing a zebra across a field, like they have immediate uh, danger. So they have a spike in their cortisol, the sugars come in, they have adrenaline, their heart rate goes up, the norepinephrine, super focused. Like all that has to happen to escape a lion. And then once the danger's gone, everything sets back to normal. We as humans don't do that. Like once the danger's gone, we continue to worry about everything. Like what if he comes back and who saw me running across that field and well, now I'm late for something. So we have this constant stress response. That you wouldn't have if you were in the animal kingdom. And that's not helping us with our health or our mental health. And then I always take the story a step further. And that's where the FOMO comes in. And I have, okay, now this zebra has outrun a lion. Beautiful zebra. Like been a zebra tola has the stripes, has the perfect hooves, has a bigger heart, like it pumps differently than a lion, like so it has more stamina to outrun the lion, like all the things. Beautiful zebra. So you, Stacey, you're really good at being a mom, good at a podcast, like you have all the stuff you're really good at. You're good at being your zebra. All right. Now our zebra outruns a lion, which is an amazing feat. Should be really happy that it's got all these things that it can do, that it just did this thing and survived and outran a lion. But our zebra, I take the book a step farther, in the moment that it tucks into the tall grass for the cortisol and the adrenaline and everything to go back to normal, it does something very human and it pulls out its phone. And it says, I wonder what the rest of the animal kingdom's up to. And our zebra sees on its feed flamingo sitting on the beach. And it's like, I wish I was flamingo. Wish I was on the beach. Wish I could wear pink. I'm sick of these stripes. I wish I want to eat shrimp. Like this really amazing animal who is built for something, like immediately wants to be something else. You get where I'm going with this? Like you built and wired and great at something, but we look at our phones and go, I wish I was doing, why didn't I take that career? Why didn't I do that? Why aren't my kids getting into Harvard? Why didn't I buy that car? Like all the stuff we do when we look at other people's success and we say, I should have done something different, or maybe I should change everything about me and go do a new thing. I think it's really unhealthy because you're probably really good at what you're doing. You've gone to school for it, or you've taken a test for it, or you've got some accreditations or some training. And then we let this fear of missing out on some other life that we could be living, that's somebody else's life, change everything about what we've been doing with our lives. And I'm not saying don't move to Portugal. I know some of your listeners are like, wait, but I want to move to Portugal like Stacey. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying this fear of missing out on somebody else's life is unhealthy. What is your life? What's really going to make you happy? What makes you tick? The things you're really good at, don't throw them away. You've worked hard to be such a good zebra or whatever. Anyway, does that make sense? That's my fear of missing out. And I think the joy comes from where you get the joy in that is looking at it from a new angle and going, somebody's behind me and wishes they was where I am right now in my career, in my life. And somebody's out ahead of me. And now I have something to aspire for. I have to find joy in where I fit in the pecking order. where I fit in my lifetime timeline. Yes, I've accomplished these things. And yes, I've overcome these things, that whole reverse resume. And look at all the things out ahead. And what is my definition of success? What does success look like for me? Because, like, I always joke that I'd love to live in Portugal or go do something like that. But my reality is, I'd miss my mom's 90 and she's here. My friends are here. I'm kind of happy just being at this point in my life, being in my own space and knowing my surroundings. I'm kind of past my adventure years. So it's different for me. I think 20 years ago, I might have loved to do that. But that's not what happipiness and success is to me now. It's very different. So you have to decide what happiness and success is. I still may come visit, Stacey. Don't get me wrong.
I think it's really hard to do, not just with social media, but also, I know for me growing up, I grew up in Boise, Idaho, and um, the community that I grew up in, there really was one main path that you took in life. It involved family, kids, certain kind of way of doing college. It was expected that we'd go to graduate school. Really devastating when I didn't go immediately. You know, I took a couple years off. I did end up going for my dad specifically, because we had this kind of thoughtful. It wasn't never any malice intended by anybody culturally, but it's just this path that's given to you that you're kind of expected to follow.
Right.
And when I started deviating from that path when I was in my early 20s, we moved first to the Dominican Republic. We lived in Vietnam after that. Then we came back, had kids, moved to Thailand, and then now we live in Portugal. And in the beginning, it was very hard because I was so early in this kind of process of creating something different. And I had no models, no path, and it was very hard. I'm finding myself in an interesting place now that my kids are a little older. And, you know, we've chosen such a drastically different path than nearly everyone I know. Our life looks totally different. Everything is just different. And I'm in this place where I'm kind of looking around and going, oh, this is really interesting. I'm not really doing anything like the other people. And I've had these moments where I've gone, I wonder if I went the right direction. Like, what would my life have looked like if I stayed in Idaho and did this? But ultimately, I always come back to choice and this kind of anchored knowing that when you create space for choice and you make choices that align with what you truly want in your life, that is freedom. And your choices look different than my choices. And then when you make choices that are truly aligned with your own vision, your own dreams, your own desires, there isn't really anything to compare it to, actually, because it's you that is driving the ship.
100%. And I love this discussion, Stacey. I say, fall in love with your choices, people. You made the choice for a reason. Fall in love with the choice you make. Quit looking at whatever, like, quit playing the what if games and, like, what if I'd have done that or married that guy or stayed in Boise? Like, there are a lot of people in Boise who wish they'd had the adventure you're having right now. Like, fall in love with the adventure you've created. But if we can't fall in love with the choices we make, I mean, we make them with what we have to work with in the moment. We make a choice. Fall in love with that choice and go all in on it. That's where joy comes from. This constantly looking at the other people, comparison is the thief of joy. You've heard that phrase. It is. Comparison is the thief of joy. Do not compare or worry. Like, just fall in love with your life. Fall in love with the choices you make. And if you make a choice and it doesn't work, make a new choice. Keep going. Keep making choices with what you have to work with in that moment and make good choices. You always know what your values are and, an idea of what you may want in life. But again, that's going to change. What I wanted in life in my 20s, very different from what I wanted in my life in my 30s. In my 30s, I wanted success. In my 40s, I wanted some stability. I had the kids at home and I needed a paycheck and, like, I had to get through college. In my 50s, I wanted this, like, I wanted to give back and have this, new adventure in the speaking space. My goals and what I wanted was different. What felt like success to me. Everything's going to change as you go forward, but you have to fall in love with the choices you make, because if you spend your time looking at other people's choices and what they made, you will just suck the joy out of your life. And I do it. Don't get me wrong. I've done it myself too. I mean, I've been married twice. Like, I don't think I always got that right, but I love both the men in my life because they were wonderful chapters in my life. Maybe, my first husband, I got two great kids from him. Like, I have to kind of love that chapter of my life. I can't regret that choice. I'm like, that was a choice I made, and there was some great stuff in there. And I learned a lot about me and life and all the stuff. And then you go on to the next thing. There is a big piece of, if you meet people who are happy and have some happiness and some joy in their life, they're happy in their own life. They're not comparing themselves to someone else. And I always say, I may not be everybody's cup of tea. That took me a long time to get to too. Like, I know I'm not for everybody. That's okay. You do you. When my kids were little, and my kids I have three, Stacy, and they're adulting now, which is the most amazing feeling once they all get out of college and you write that last check, let me tell you. Um,
Although I live in Europe, so college expenses are
oh,
not quite the same
smart.
as hopefully,
Smart,
as long as they
smart.
don't decide to go to the US.
Yeah, smart woman there. Yeah, I did not. Private colleges out of state, all three of them. But
Wow.
I had made some choices that put us in a position for them to have that opportunity. So anyway, when I used to tell my kids when they were young, and I still tell it to them now. My daughter is 25. She's in New York. She works in AI. Living the dream in New York. Just went to the X Games. Flew out to X Games in Denver, like with her cute little Scottish boyfriend, living the dream, but also has had her own share of tough times. And I do want to get to raising resilient kids. I do want to get to that because you mentioned it. But I always told my kids when they were little, and I continue to tell them now, hey, go be you. Everybody else is taken. And it's kind of like the Dr. Seuss or whatever. It's my own take on all of that. And when they were little and going to, elementary school, I'd say, hi, have a good day. Go be you. Everybody else is taken. And then middle school and then high school, same thing. And then when they went off to college, like, reinvent yourself, like, be the next version of yourself. People there don't even know who you are. Go be you. Everybody else is taken. Who do you want to be? Not what are you doing? Not go do a thing, but who do you want to be? Being and doing it, like doing as a job, as a career. Well, who do you want to be as a human? Go be you. Everybody else is taken. So that's one of my favorite sayings when it comes to, trying to figure out where you find some joy and some happiness in this weird, big, messy, marvelous life journey that we're on.
I like that framing. It's a really nice way to think about it. And also, I think it gives kids an orientation of choice as well and who they decide they want to show up as. You brought it around to resilience in kids, which is what I opened our conversation with. And it's an interesting, it's just been on my mind lately this year, actually end of last year. I started really paying attention to my kids and whether I felt they had developed resilience in their lives. I think what I arrived at is not yet. I think they're so young still. They're 9 and almost 12. And of course, that's something you develop through going through hardships throughout your life, usually. And it's interesting in the stage that we're in because a lot of that gets developed in their social relationships and their school experiences. My daughter goes to a Portuguese public school, and my son goes to a private British school. And his is very soft and gentle, and they have animals that live there and, a forest school and stuff. My daughter's school is, and she went there too, but now she's aged out. So she's at the Portuguese school. My daughter's school, the Portuguese public system, there's some things that I appreciate, but there are some things that are very challenging for me as an American being in this structure. And the biggest challenge that I have is that it's very, it's kind of antiquated in the severity of like the punitive system, and kind of this expectation that kids just need to follow exactly everything that's been told to them without deviating and just do it with utmost respect, And that's not necessarily my philosophy. I'm raising free thinkers that I think if they disagree, they should be able to push back and respectfully, but share their opinion and argue respectfully. And that's how we run our house. But it's been interesting because as we've been navigating this experience in this system, coaching her through what has been a challenge to get used to and still retain yourself, who you are in a system that isn't aligned necessarily. And that also, I think, is really fertile ground for developing resilience. So I'd love to hear your reflections since this is something that you teach on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for a couple things. One, you're in the thick of it with 9 and 12. Like, this is peak parenting years. That's what I call them. Those middle
Girl,
school
I
years.
feel it right now. I do feel it.
I always say I like when they're like toddlery age, not babies, but toddlers. And then I love them again. I mean, I loved all of the years. But I love parenting toddlers when everything's new and different. And then I love the high school years because then they're people and you'd have real conversations. Middle school is one of the toughest because it's just a lot. It is one of the toughest times. So more power to you. But a couple of things with that. When you said you don't think they're resilient, I will tell you, without a doubt, without ever meeting your children, you have moved them several times, and they've
That's
had to
true.
give up. They've had to give up their houses and their friends and move to new places. They're resilient.
Yeah, that's true.
Was
That's a good
the
point.
Yeah, they are already resilient, and the fact that you're having these conversations and saying, "Okay, this is a system you have to live within," like, because we live in a world where we can't always just say what we want and push back. We have to live within systems. They're already learning to be resilient. The definition of resilience, let me just back it up to that as we talk about parenting, is your ability to adapt and grow stronger, to learn and grow stronger and adapt in a positive way to whatever happens in your life.
Mm.
That's the definition of resilience. And let me people get this wrong all the time. They think it's like persistence or grit. Persistence and grit are very different. Persistence is getting up and doing the same thing over and over, like never giving up. That's getting up again and never giving up. Grit is pushing through when things are really, really hard. Resilience is learning, growing stronger, and adapting in a positive way to whatever happens in your life. That learn, grow, it's very different. Like, and I hate to put this out there because people don't even like talking about it. Oh, look, think about 2020. When you were like in the beginning of 2020, when the pandemic hit, we all had like New Year's resolutions and things we were going to do, whatever you were doing at the moment. And then you couldn't just double down and go hard and have persistence through that year, right? Because the world changed. We all had to adapt and figure out a new way to do things with a different world around us. Grit and persistence were not going to get you through 2020 and have you have success. You had to be resilient.
Yeah.
You had to adapt and grow. So that if you need to think about what the difference between them is. So when you're raising resilient kids, it's their ability to adapt and learn and grow stronger from the things around them. You've taught, like when they had to move, that's a change. They had to adapt and learn and grow. They're already more resilient. They're in a new school now. They're adapting and learning and growing. They're not always getting along with their teachers and having to figure it out. Adapting, learning, growing. Where people make mistakes, and when you know you're not raising resilient kids, is when you don't let them fail or don't let them struggle or don't let them go through a challenge and you jump in and fix it for them. Those helicopter moms or whatever the phrases that people have now. I don't even know what phrase it is now. There's some big ones out there. But bulldozers, like if you go in and fix the problems, letting your children fail is really hard to do. I mean, it's really hard. I remember instances with all three of mine where I had to just let them sit in it and go, yep, this super sucks. This is what happened. This is so bad. This is so sucky. Like when my daughter would rehearse really hard for a part in the Nutcracker. She was a gymnast like me, but then she became a ballerina, a very good ballerina. She danced with Joffrey in New York in the summers, like all into it. And then she would rehearse, an audition for a part and she wouldn't get it. And, I wasn't the mom that was going to go, hey, my kid's better. Let's have a discussion. No, you didn't get it. Sit in it. Super sucks. Sorry. Try again next year. Like, or the first time she applied to a college and she didn't get early admission. She didn't even get a no. She just didn't get early admission. And she was like in a puddle on the ground thinking they don't want me. I was like, no, get out of the fetal position. Like they're just, it's just early acceptance to one of the toughest schools that you chose. Give it a minute and look at all these other schools that do want you. But no, all she could see was that. And I had to just kind of let her sit in it and go, yeah, you didn't get into the early acceptance in this one school. Now, within an hour, she was like, screw them. I don't want to go there anyway. Like she did the work in her head and got there, and she went to a different college and loved it and had a great experience. But I wasn't going to go, no, we're going to call that school and get you in. No, we have to let our children fail, whether it's riding a bike and letting them fall or getting in an argument with a friend and going, hey, you need to go apologize and go figure it out. Like Like, you have to figure it out. I'm not going to call their mom and figure it out for you. We have to let our kids fail. We have to let them screw up, fail tests, blow up their friendships with it, so they can learn how to do it right. That's my biggest when it comes to resilience. And we look at the true definition of it. That's where we can build resilient kids. I mean, my kids have all been through some big things at this point, even stuff in college where they called home and like, I just ruined my whole life. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you didn't, well, I couldn't say that. But it's like, no, you just really screwed up. And wow, that was dumb, let's, but this is going to be a story you tell later. Doesn't feel funny now, but it's going to be funny later. Or let's figure out how to get you through it. This is a screw up. This is a bad chapter of your life. This is super, it's a sucky few pages in the story of your life, but it's not the whole thing. Let's learn from it and move forward. That's resilience. That's how you let your kids be resilient. You have to kind of let them screw up and fail and, jump in and be around the wrong people sometimes and figure it out. Hey, those aren't my people, all those things.
It seems like good advice for ourselves as well as,
Oh, yeah.
being willing to jump in and fail. And I think as we get older and maybe a little more jaded with the various life experiences we've had, it's easy to not take risk, not try new things. But we also are always a work in progress at every single age, whether you're 30 or 90, you have every opportunity. So it's beautiful advice for kids, but also I think for us as adults as well.
Oh, myself included. I'm in my later 50s now, and I still have, like, I just had my January of this year did not go as planned, and I've got to regroup because I screwed up a couple things. I also got in an argument with one of my good friends. Like, it doesn't go anywhere, folks. It's a lifetime of learning and growing and figuring out who you are and where you fit in. It's part of the big, messy, marvelous life we live. It's you get good at it after a while. You just get more
Mhm.
comfortable with who you are, and you get good with screwing up. Like, I'm looking at that going, well, that was a really bad idea and a waste of money, but oh well. I learned that lesson the hard way. I can't get that money back or that time, and that bombed.
It is a muscle though, I feel that you keep up over time, that you if you don't practice taking even micro risks or putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, then it's like that muscle can atrophy. So I think living a life where you do screw up, like you should be screwing up, hopefully not to hurt people or hurt yourself,
Right.
but you should be making mistakes because that's part of the experience of life. So I love that you're also still experiencing that. Imagine that'll continue on into infinity.
You will.
Um, you have so many cool things that you're working on. Right now, I know you're in the process of rewriting. I don't know what level of rewriting you're doing on your book, kind of recasting, revamping one of your two books. I'd love to hear a little bit about that, what you're working on with that, and anything else that you're excited about in your work and life at the moment.
Yeah, Stacey, I should be asking for your advice on the re-something. I don't know if it's a revamp or a rewrite or a re-what. So you're right on track with trying to figure that out with me. I do want to do an updated version, let's just say,
Yeah.
of my second book. My second book is But I Want Both, A Working Mom's Guide to Living a Life She Loves. And it's all about when your career takes off at the same time when you decide to start a family. It's a very tough time in a young person's life. And I was mentoring a lot of young women at the time that the pandemic hit, and they all said, "Oh, Nina, we can't go like hang out and drink wine with you, and you can tell us that we're going to be okay and we don't suck. So can you like write it down for us?" So this book was a labor of love, and kind of I had the pictures of these young women on my wall as I was writing it. But it got too wordy, and it's also pre-pandemic, and the world has changed. So I do want to take that book and uh, skinny it down. I like a short book. A short book's hard to write, but in the self-help space, I'm all about a short book. So I want to, skinny it down. I don't like the cover. I want to make it a little more gender neutral because men have this issue too when they start families, and that's really changed in the last 20 years as men have become more, running households. So I just want to rethink that. So I don't know what the answer is. I know I do have a new cover design that I've been working on. I think part of me is like, do I just throw it in ChatGPT and say, add some
No,
pen?
please
I know.
don't. Please don't do that.
Well, that was my
Sorry,
thing
I had to
when I
interrupt.
wrote it. Yeah, when I wrote it, but seriously, I had that thought. I'm like, do I just go, hey, make this more current, like whatever?
No, please don't do
Yeah.
that.
Okay, well, good. Thank you for telling me that because that would be the easy route, and then hiring somebody to make a new cover. I could just do a slap job on it, but but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
to do with it. I don't want to write a whole new one. I just want to make this one better because I have a new book I want to I have an idea, but this one I feel like it's still valuable, but
Yeah.
I'm not proud of it, so I want to make myself more proud of it so I can push it a little harder and help people with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have a couple options on that. One could be you hire what's known as a manuscript review. So you'd hire an editor to do a read through and give you high level feedback, editorial direction, chapter by chapter feedback, and page by page commentary for you to guide your revision. The other side of that, that would be better probably use of your time in some ways, would be to hire an editorial partner to actually come in and shape it into the way that you want it. So basically they would come in, work with you, and do a lot of the heavy lifting to trim it down. I think it's nice to bring in somebody from the outside because they have a different perspective and they're working from the lens as a reader advocate, somebody that's in there to really bring it to life for the reader. If it were me, that's probably what I would do, would be to bring in a partner, like an
That
editor on the
that is
project.
great to know. Where do you find somebody like that? Just while I'm switching the
Mm,
tables and having an interviewing view for my podcast, where do I find
yeah.
someone like that?
Well, I will be happy to send you a few names of people that I trust. But there's also, for anybody listening, there's a marketplace that we'll be sure to link to called Readsy that has, it's really well vetted, and they have, you can like put your project on there and query aligned editors, so they'll kind of match you with editors.
Oh,
So
fabulous.
that can be one way. But one of my favorite ways to find an editor, because it can be so specific to your needs on a book. So, for example, if you are, let's say you're a woman of color writing to other women of color, and you want to have an editor who is a woman of color and has worked on leadership, let's say it's a leadership book,
Yeah.
leadership books, and you have read a couple that you really loved. I would go to those books. I would look in the acknowledgement section, find who their editor is, and it's okay if they work at Penguin because a lot of them freelance,
Mhm.
um, and reach out to them directly. Or if you've read a book that you really love and you can't find the name on the publication page or in the acknowledgments, email the author and ask them if they're willing to share the editor with you.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a
Yeah,
little
so that's
sleuthing, but
yeah.
it's a good
I
way to find editors.
I was a
Yeah.
journalist. I like a little sleuthing. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Then
Okay, well,
the other thing that you'd have to be mindful of is that you will probably be working with a developmental editor or a substantive editor. So that they sometimes call it content editing. So that
mhm.
would be the type of editor that you'd be looking for, which is a little different than copy editing or proofreading, which is more production editing. So
Oh,
that's
that's good to
helpful
know
for languaging when you go
when I
to
go
find that
look.
editor. Yeah, but I think that could make it really fun too, so that you don't feel like you're, you know, just on your own trying to wrangle this book into a shape that you feel great about, but you have like creative energy around it and partnership and, like to make it joyful and fun to bring it to market.
Yes. I don't want to make it into some big this, so I do need to pull in a better human to make that. See, I can use my own framework to make this an easier
Yeah.
project.
Oh, I love that. You could totally use your framework for
I need
that.
to
That's
pull
a
in some humans. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think partnership is such a powerful for anything, any major goal, and also accountability because it drives forward the getting it to market, right? Like otherwise it could just drag and drag and drag and drag. So,
Right.
well, that's
Well, on
exciting. You have to keep me posted on what you end up
I
doing.
will. I will. And on that note, it kind of segues right into the other part of your
Yeah.
question of what I'm excited about right now, because I'm not excited about the book yet. I just want to do it.
Well, I
That's right.
hope after this conversation you're going
I
to get
am kind of.
excited. Yes.
Yeah. I'm more. I'm more. But the other thing I am excited about is I just launched and I brought in a younger, more creative human than me in her 20s to kind of help me launch this because it's for a younger audience. But it will apply to anyone. I launched a workshop, and it's called the Now What Workshop for people who are going through those now what moments in their life. Like, I just got fired. I just got divorced. I just had this horrible thing happen to me. I just got caught up in this scandal, whatever it is. Um, it's called the Now What Workshop, and we just launched that. So that's the other thing I'm really excited about, is putting that out into the world. It's self-guided, do it your, because people don't want to like be face to face. They kind of need that privacy to go through a moment. And, I was really pushed back against doing something like that for a long time, because I'm a big proponent of therapy, and get a licensed clinical therapist if you need help. I truly believe that is what is needed when you're
Yeah.
going through a difficult time.
Agreed.
I'm
Agreed.
I'm a big fan. Yeah. Get a
Mhm.
license. That's not me. It's not my wheelhouse. That's not me. But this, people kept, after I would speak and stuff, they would say, can you just put it all out there and explain it more? So this is just me going, okay, this happened. Let me just get you to a better spot so you don't do something drastic or take a really, bad, turn, or get stuck where you are right now. Let me help you not get stuck in this really crappy moment in your life. And that's what the Now What Workshop is. And we just launched that. And it's me on camera and some worksheets and some ideas. And it's really fun. And with it, what's kind of fun too, and you'll like this as a book editor, when I first put my first book out, This Is Not the End, I went to a publisher who said I had to take the curse words out, because my publisher had some other parameters, and said you couldn't curse. So I had one, challenge myself to come up with ways to say the things I wanted to without cursing. But two, I have the old version. So in the Now What Workshop, I offer the unedited, unabridged, really crass Nina version of it, which is kind of fun too, which someone suggested I do.
That's
Very,
awesome.
yeah, it's very ridiculous. But anyway,
That's
that's what
that's
I'm
funny.
excited about right now, is putting that out into the world in a meaningful way.
That's great. We will be sure to link to that in our show notes so that people can find that. Where can people find you and learn more about you, follow along in your work and all the things you're putting out into the world?
I would love that. Yeah, Instagram's the best place. I put out daily motivation. I think motivation and inspiration, kind of like a shower. You can't just do it once. Like, we need to keep
Yeah.
doing it. So on Instagram, on Nina Speaks, Nina Speaks. It's split up. There are other speakers named Nina, but it's Nina Speaks. And you can follow me there. On LinkedIn, if your organization or your company needs someone to speak at a conference or do a workshop, I do really fun stuff around that. I'm really proud of that work. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I just started doing some stuff on TikTok, because again, I brought in this young person, and I think I'm hilarious. I put some funny things out there. I have yet to really lean into it, but we shall see where that goes. But yeah, and I'm on Facebook. I'm all over social media, wherever you want to follow me. But Instagram is where I'm more focused right now.
Well, we'll be sure to link to all the things so people can find you. But wow, thank you for this conversation. Such insights that I've already taken away so much. I'm sure our listeners have as well. And I just really appreciate your time and energy today.
Stacy, it was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for having me on and trusting me with your listeners. And all the best to you and to everybody listening. It's okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. And I wish you, Stacy, and everybody all the best. Thanks for having me on.
Such a pleasure. And thank you to you, our listener, for staying with us today, listening. And I hope that you maybe were reached in a way that you needed to be today, or got something actionable that you can apply, or maybe this is something you'll share with a friend. Thank you, as always, to Rita Dominguez for her production of this podcast. I know I say this every week, but I'm telling you, you would not be listening to this without her. She does everything to make all the things happen. And I am so grateful. If you have 20, 30 seconds right now to rate and review this podcast, I would be really grateful. It makes a huge, huge, huge difference in my ability to reach more listeners with the message of living a life that's not just better, but beyond better. And I will be back with you before you know it.